Hey, what's up you guys? You're watching Team APS, Paul here. So I realized I've actually never made a video where I've just explained my 10 favorite Yu-Gi-Oh decks ever, so that's what this video is. Now I kind of have made some similar ones in the past where I've like alluded to what my favorite decks are or maybe what my least favorite decks are, but this is a comprehensive list of the 10 decks I've enjoyed the most during my time playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It was actually kind of hard to make this list. There are a lot of decks that I like, but these are probably the 10 most enjoyable ones, and I'll explain why for each. Let's hop in. So number 10 is Yang Zing's, one of the more recent decks in this list, although it came out in 2014. I like this deck because it involves floating and it involves synchro summoning, and these are two of the things I really enjoy doing in Yu-Gi-Oh! I like Yang Zing's because it means that, you know, if I want to play defensively, I can just continue to set Yang Zing's and kind of let them die and gain advantage, especially when I have cards like, you know, Yang Zing Creation out. So if I get a bad hand, it means that I'm usually pretty safe. It also means that I can grind out similar, you know, like floaty decks. Think, say, Burning Abyss. I actually feel like Yang Zing has a pretty decent matchup against Burning Abyss for this reason. I like that. But then I also like the fact that, you know, whenever I want to, on a dime almost, I can basically make a synchro. And the best part about Yang Zing's is they can make pretty much any synchro in the book. So while, you know, they've got their set of, you know, archetype specific ones like Baxia and all that, and Yazi, which, don't get me wrong, they're all great. And now we have like Danglong, but they can just make things like Trishula and Mistworm and Beals and, you know, Scarlight, just any powerful synchro that you could possibly want to make, they can make it. And they give it buffs, and I like the idea of, you know, a field of powerful monsters that have buffs and are just really hard for your opponent to get around. And that's probably the trend that you'll notice throughout this video as I explain the decks that I like. They will tend to be those kinds of decks that, like Yang Zing's, allow me to be defensive but also go off on a dime and make a field that's difficult for my opponent to get around. So yeah, Yang Zing makes number 10. Now, it doesn't make a higher list because some of the things I don't like about it are just the fact that that defensive nature means it can sometimes be a bit tough to play off of just a top deck in this deck, you know, like that's sometimes a bit of a problem, and they do miss timing, and sometimes the fact that they are so slow to get started can mean that it's hard to actually set up the play that you want because levels are getting mixed up as your Yang Zings die, and that's no fun. But yeah, it is a great deck, so that's number 10. Deck number 9 is Wind-Ups. So in a similar vein, it's a deck that kind of lets me float around for a bit before I make strong plays. It's just Xyz rather than synchros, but what I really like about Wind-Ups is that I'm able to feel my opponent out for the first couple of turns. So, you know, I can just float with Rabbit and Factory and get advantage from that. You know, Magician lets me get some pluses, those types of things. And actually one of my favorite plays to make in Wind-Ups has always been just making Zenmaines in defense and then activating Factory and just kind of like sitting on that. So I like the ability to do that, the ability to just sort of float and gain advantage and see what I need to do. And like Yang Zing's, except for Xyz, this deck has basically access to the entire rank 3, 4, and 5 Xyz pool, and that's crazy to me. I love it. I love that you can easily make these things using cards like Shark and Wind Up, you know, Warrior and things like that. And, you know, I really hope that eventually we will get that freaking boat back to 1 so this deck can really do some stuff. But, you know, I didn't even play this deck actually when the hand loop was popular. I played it kind of immediately after, kind of during the Shockmaster and so on phase. And, you know, you can make so many fun Xyz here. Like, Zenmaio is fun. You know, I like making a field of, like, Tiras and like, Zenmaines and Maestro kind of back in the day. Those are some of my favorites to make because they were hard to get rid of and they sort of offered you control over your opponent. And I liked that, but also just cards like Alucard and, you know, what's the one that can attack directly? Volcasaurus, stuff like that. Those have always been some of my favorite Xyz to make, and they still are. So yeah, this deck definitely gets a plus in my book. Number 9. Number 8 deck is Black Wings. I played this deck back in 2010-ish, right after its prime again. But yeah, my favorite part about Black Wings is that it kind of has a bit of an anti-meta element to it while also being meta. My favorite card in the deck in particular was Icarus Attack. I always loved the ability to go 2 for 2 with my opponent, but if they played into it, I could always like +1, and that was great. You know, if it got MST'd or if a Blackwing got bottomless, I could always just chain Icarus Attack and, you know, get some advantage out of the way. But more importantly, like with the other decks in this list, I can slow roll early on. I can just use Black Whirlwind and summon things like Shura and Bora and search Kalutes and Blizzards for later and just sort of keep myself safe. Kind of, you know, just feel the opponent up a bit. But also, it sounded weird. But also, I am still able to kind of explode when I need to. I used value when that was a thing, but not as much anymore. Obviously, cards like, you know, Blizzard are still really powerful. Gale's a good card. If you wanted to play the deck in a more anti-meta way though, you could. You could focus more on cards like Sirocco and even use Skill Drain in this deck and it worked pretty well. So you could slow roll a bit. So I liked the flexibility and I liked a lot of Blackwing's synchros. I actually haven't used too much of the new support. So like that one that's sort of like a, what is it, like Panaki? The one that's sort of like X-Saber Dark Soul. And some of their new synchros, I actually haven't used those as much. So when I say Blackwings are my favorite, it's kind of more of the old school Blackwings. But I mean, you're not to say that the new cards are bad, but I just haven't used them. Deck number 7 is actually kind of an old, obscure, weird deck, and that's the Chaos Alchemy deck. So this is basically the deck that used Dimensional Alchemist. I don't remember exactly the time period. It was like late 2010, 2011-ish, I feel like. I mean, maybe kind of before then, where you just used Dimensional Alchemist and, you know, you banished cards and then he floated. Whenever he died, you could get back into your banished cards. So, you know, this could mean something that you'd banish with Allure of Darkness. This could mean, you know, banished Battle Faders and things like that. So I really liked using this deck, and you know, it used, you know, Chaos Sorcerer, Effect Veiler, Battle Fader, just like lots of light and dark monsters, many of which banished themselves. It also was kind of similar to Salvo Dad. It might not have actually been the same thing. I'm not really sure, but yeah, this was a fun deck. I don't know why I enjoyed playing it so much. It just felt like I kind of had this endless pool of recycling available to me, and I like that. You'll find out in some of the later decks in this list, I like the whole idea of like a circle of advantage that I can just sort of draw from at any time. So yeah, the Dimensional Alchemist deck was a lot of fun. Deck 6 is Madolche. So I actually don't really know how I came to enjoy this deck so much. It wasn't something I really played in its prime. I didn't play it like when Angeli even released. I just kind of played it afterwards, and it reminds me of like a sort of faster wind-ups in a sense, with a more accessible, just immediately good boss monster. So Madolches, they can make lots of rank 3s, they can make several rank 4s, but I just like Tiaramisu's effect. Non-targeting removal that doesn't destroy or anything is really, really, really good. And you know, the fact that this deck was able to gain lots of advantage, use cards like Angeli and Hoot Cake and Mufawili and Messengelido to search stuff, I just really liked that whole dynamic of it. It felt like a really good combo deck. A bit of a self-contained one. There wasn't like a whole lot of room to venture out, though you could. You could add like E-Teles and Psychic monsters, and then you could make stuff like Naturia Beast and Barkion in this deck, which is a lot of fun. And things like that. But yeah, all in all, just a great Xyz deck. I like the Xyz decks that just make the kind of rank 4 toolbox engine without being the boring rank 4 decks, like the ones that still at least have some flavor and some personality to them. Deck 5 is Hero City. So this is what I played in around 2010. I played I guess it was called like Big City back in those days. The deck with like Stratos, and I use Wildheart and what's the fire elemental hero? Like Elemental Hero Heat or something like that. Yeah, and it used Elemental Hero Ocean to basically recycle heroes during each of your standby phases. You could like return one from your grave or the field to your hand, so you could reuse Stratos and stuff like that. And it also used that card Skyscraper 2, Hero City, which, you know, let you summon a hero monster that had been destroyed by battle once per turn. So it was kind of this recycling thing of heroes that just got in your opponent's way. And of course, it was still an anti-meta deck, so you were still using a lot of traps. Royal Oppression was around at this time, and it was extremely powerful. You could use like, you know, Neos Alias and Gemini Spark, and it can make use of Miracle Fusion because you actually had lots of different attributes. And later on, this kind of became more of just the hero beat deck that we knew for a long, long time. And so I kind of eventually transitioned into that, you know, just the one with Alias and just Gem Sparks and Miracle Fusions and what is it, The Shining or whatever. So yeah, but initially I just liked the one with Ocean and Skyscraper 2. That was a lot of fun for me. So yep. Deck number 4, and a lot of people may not like me too much for this, but is Spellbooks. So This to me is a deck, I didn't initially like this deck all that much, I didn't particularly care for it, but over time I've really grown to enjoy it. Like I mentioned earlier in this list, I like decks that give me this sort of feeling of like this well of advantage, and that's what I ultimately get with spellbooks. The ability to, you know, kind of recycle this pool of resources where like I've got spellbooks that are banished, I've got ones in my grave, in my deck, Tower recycles, and all of the spellbooks, you know, Eternity recycles my banished cards, and they all just kind of come back, and there's this flow to it, and I really like that. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't like how long turns can take when you're using this deck. It actually feels like it takes even longer when you play it on like Dueling Network, and even like WIGO Pro, it just the steps that you have to take. But that said, I mean, I really do enjoy the deck. I like that it can really wear an opponent out. And I think that while some people would say that's a bit lame, the truth is, you know, if an opponent can't be patient enough to play around spellbooks, then maybe they should, you know, look in the mirror and, you know, realize like, hey, this is a deck that you have to learn how to play against, because cards like Spellbook of Fate, while powerful, are still balanced, and their boss monster is not that great, you know. There's definitely a flow to it, and if Spellbook's flow gets broken in any way, you know, even if that's as simple as like the Spellbook Magician of Prophecy getting Effect Veiler, simple things like that, or the Field Spell getting MST, it's completely broken off. So I mean, like, it's not like a difficult deck to beat. So yeah, I mean, I definitely like it. It's one that I probably wouldn't take it to an event. I feel like that would just take a long time to play that all day, but it's something I'll play online or with friends for a long time. Really great deck, and you can kind of throw in some other stuff into it. Number 3 is Mermails. So you guys probably could have guessed this. I really enjoy playing this deck. Now, I am a little bit different. I actually haven't really played Mermails much recently. I'm kind of more of, you can guess from this list and stuff, I'm more of a like gather resources and slowly wear my opponent out type of player. So the things I'll play Mermails with more of an emphasis on like longevity. I like cards like Abyssland, and I like cards like Salvage, those types of things that really allow me to just wear my opponent down and keep out resourcing them until it's kind of like I like to play with my food before I eat it, if that makes sense. But yeah, so that's kind of what I like to do, and that's why I've enjoyed this deck. But while I can, you know, slow play my opponent, not like literally slow play, I don't do that, but like, you know, kind of turn by turn control my opponent, I can also explode on a dime. So, you know, you've got these cards like Megalo and Abyss Gun and Neptibus, all this stuff that really kind of let you just flood the field really fast if you need to. And so I like that there's that duality there, like with many of the decks in this list. So yeah, Mermails, they're cool. Also, I have played through several of the formats of them. So I remember like Tidal, that was a fun one. I remember when we finally got Prince. So all that stuff is great to me. Yeah, but yeah, Mermails. Deck number 2 is Gladiator Beasts. This was one of my favorites. I actually got the idea from one of my best friends in Yu-Gi-Oh! At the time. Still a friend, but yeah, doesn't play Yu-Gi-Oh! Anymore. But yeah, Gladiator Beasts. So this deck, I enjoyed it because, you know, at the time it was obviously one of the higher tier decks. This was like, you know, 2008, 9, 10-ish days, where it was always kind of a safe pick after a ban list or something, and never really got hit after the big Bestiary hit thing. And it was just fun because, as you can probably tell, I'm all about, you know, playing the long game, playing the grind, you know, playing turn by turn. Every turn I can just attack with my Glads and then swap them out and get advantage with Bestiary or Murmillo, or recycle my Chariots. And I've played like every variant of this deck known to man. You know, I liked playing the Gazaris Turbo kind of Prisma with Test Tiger variants. I've, you know, played just all the variants in the book, really. Even like with cards like Rescue Rabbit, I mean, I've toyed around with that. So I definitely really like Gladiator Beasts. They're actually one of the decks that I've like topped regionals with. Lots of fond memories. It was cool because you could always like play any spells and traps that you wanted in that deck. Like, it always felt like no matter what my spell and trap loadout was, it always worked really effectively. Probably speaks more to the archetype than anything. And you know, it was able to use cards like Rescue Cat and just all sorts of fun things. So obviously the deck has crept out now, even with the 3 Bestiary and stuff. But you know, still, it's a fun deck that I will still hop back to from time to time. And my favorite deck of all time, and if you've watched this channel for like a year or so now, you've probably heard me at least mention it, is X-Sabers. I love this deck, duh. So this deck, I actually haven't played it all that much recently, but I do want to eventually get a deck profile of it up. Sorry that's been a bit slow, but yeah, X-Sabers are fun. It kind of is an amalgamation of a lot of the things that are on this list. The ability to float with cards like Ember's Blade, cards like Dark Soul, I really enjoy, and the ability to make synchros that are basically limitless. You know, X-Sabers have all sorts of levels. You know, they've got level 1, 2, 3 tuners, and you know, it's all these different levels of monsters. So you can make pretty much any synchro that you want. My favorite thing about X-Sabers though is not actually any of that. It's kind of just the fact that you've got this archetype of monsters that have nothing to do with each other, believe it or not. So unlike, you know, today's cards where it might say like, oh, when you have an X-Saber, you summon this, and you can get an X-Saber from your graveyard, and you know, banish one to summon an X-Saber from your deck, and if an X-Saber would die, you can special summon this from here. It's not like that. You don't get like all this X-Saber synergy. You just get cards like Ember's Blade and Dark Soul that search one, but other than that, it's like Pastoral just has a random effect to save himself. Full Helm Knights kind of has a random effect. You've got all these monsters that don't really have a whole lot to do with each other, but somehow, when you play it right, it all comes together, and you're able to just somehow explode and make these crazy plays. And you know, you've got powerful synchros, you've got stuff like Hyunlei, you've got stuff like Gothams, you've got access to Naturia, Beast, and Barkion. Lovely things. So yeah, all in all, X-Sabers is my favorite deck. It's probably the deck that I've played most addictively for the longest amount of time. I would love for, you know, cards like Rescue Cat to come back. Please, let's go. And yeah, so X-Sabers make my #1. And those are my 10 favorite Yu-Gi-Oh decks of all time. I mean, I guess that's subject to change. There are loads of decks that didn't quite make the cut. I mean, I enjoyed playing Agents for a while. I've enjoyed playing like Batteryman. I actually liked Teledad when that was a thing. And just various decks like that just didn't quite make the list. And a really new one is actually the recent Blue Eyes deck. I kind of enjoy that, but it's a bit boring after a while. So yeah, what are your favorite decks? Your 10 favorite Yu-Gi-Oh decks of all time, and why? You don't have to necessarily leave the whole list, because I mean, that could get really lengthy, but feel free to, and we can talk about it in the comments. So yeah, that's it. I hope you guys liked the video. I hope you learned a little bit more about Paul from Team APS. And yeah, that's gonna be basically it. Subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh, and I will see you guys in the next one.